Today, the Justice Department released Attorney General William Barr's redacted version of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's final report. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. Well, it's finally here. We finally have a redacted version of the thing that everyone in Washington has been anxiously awaiting for almost 2 years. And for 2 years, the media has been obsessively dissecting every morsel of information or speculation about the investigation. There was even the time Mueller was spotted at the airport at the same gate as Don Jr., and pundits speculated about everything from his clothes to where he was going.
We're about to have a wow moment. Stand by. We now have the photo. This was taken by Politico. This is Reagan Airport in Washington, D.C. The man spotlighted on the left side of your screen, just sitting there hanging out. This is Robert Mueller. This is the special counsel, who is the one who we've been saying knows way more than we all do.
You know, it's interesting.
It's a wow.
So, having worked for Bob Mueller, I know that he has 2 ties, a red one and a blue one. He's, very solid.
Are we reading into the ties? But he's not wearing one.
He's not wearing one. It looks as though, I'd be curious to see where he's headed. Is he taking a little vacation, which is probably much deserved, or is he going to hunt for more clues?
They were speculating over the ties he wears. Blue tie means Trump's innocent, red tie means he's guilty, and no tie means Robert Mueller is ready for a night out on the town. Also, he probably wasn't going anywhere. I bet Robert Mueller goes to the airport just because he likes going through security. All right, you're all good, sir. Scan me again for safety. And on top of that, we've been living through months of endless speculation about when the investigation would finally end. In fact, the media specifically kept speculating about whether the investigation was wrapping up or winding down.
Do you see Mueller wrapping this up at any point in the near future?
When you read the tea leaves, this could mean that the probe is actually winding down.
That multifaceted investigation may be wrapping up soon.
That could very well signal that the investigation is indeed winding down.
Does this mean Mueller's getting close to wrapping up?
The investigation appears to be winding down.
Maybe this thing is wrapping up.
This could be winding down.
It may be close to wrapping up.
Potentially the investigation is winding down.
That right there is my favorite House of Pain song. Wrap it up, wind it down, jerk us around. They've been saying the Mueller report was about to come out forever. In fact, true story, when they found those 20,000-year-old cave paintings in France, one of them just said, "Is Mueller wrapping up?" Now the report is finally here, but before he even had any idea what was in the report, Trump spent weeks declaring victory and setting incredibly high expectations for how the full report would totally and completely vindicate him of everything, with one small caveat that comes at the very, very end.
It was a complete and total exoneration. The Mueller report was great. It could not have been better. The finding was very, very strong. No collusion, no obstruction, no Russia, no nothing. The result was great. No obstruction, no collusion, no anything. Total exoneration, complete vindication. Everybody waited for the Mueller report. Then it turns out that there's no obstruction, no collusion, no anything. I won. No collusion, no obstruction. I won. I have not read the Mueller report. I haven't seen the Mueller report. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care about the Mueller report. The Mueller report is great. It exonerates me. I've never read it. I don't care about it. You're like a terrible boyfriend who keeps giving mixed messages. I love you, but I need space, and I can't live without you, but you're crowding me. In fact, Trump even said he was being charitable to us by not overreacting. It's a disgrace what happened, and again, it should never happen to a president again. You're just lucky I happen to be the president, because a lot of other presidents would have reacted much differently than I reacted.
That's kind of true. I mean, it really only happened to one other president, and he quit. Now, before we get into the report, let's just review what we already know. For one thing, Mueller has already produced a staggering number of indictments and convictions of some of the president's closest aides and advisors. I mean, look at this. This group has more criminals in it than a Hollywood PTA meeting. 2, even before we got the report today, Trump was already directly implicated in a crime to break election law during the 2016 campaign by paying hush money to cover up an affair. Of course, as you might remember, prosecutors mysteriously referred to him as individual number 1 in the court filing, despite also telling us that individual number 1 began an ultimately successful campaign for president of the United States. And then, in a big dramatic reveal, Trump's ex-lawyer Michael Cohen revealed to the world who individual number 1 was.
Last fall, I pled guilty in federal court to felonies for the benefit of at the direction of and in coordination with individual number one. And for the record, individual number one is President Donald J. Trump.
Yeah, dude, we know. That was like the easiest Where's Waldo of all time. So what we already knew was damning, and even Trump's inner circle seemed to know the report might be damning, which might explain why their handling of the report was so weird. First, Barr issued his infamous letter summarizing the report. Then a week later, he issued a second letter saying the first letter wasn't supposed to be a summary. Then Mueller's team started leaking and saying they weren't happy with Barr's summary. Then we found out they wrote their own summaries that Barr didn't use. Then we found out Barr briefed the White House on the report. Then we found out Barr let Trump's attorneys see the report. I mean, Jesus, who else got to see this thing before us? I don't know. I feel like legally... I feel like I come off as bad guy. Where my Sharpie? Then this morning, Barr held a press conference on the report where he spun all the conclusions before reporters or the public actually had a chance to read the report. No one had read it. Well, some people had read it, as Barr explained.
Earlier this week, the president's personal counsel requested and was given the opportunity to read a final version of the redacted report before it was publicly released.
That means Rudy Giuliani got to read the report before the rest of us. And from the looks of it, he was trying to open his eyes wide enough to read all 400 pages at once. I don't like the flip. Spread them all out. Now, on the question of the Trump campaign's ties to Russia, the Mueller report says the investigation also identified numerous links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. But in his press conference, Barr chose instead to highlight a sentence from his report that he knew would please his boss and repeated it over and over.
The special counsel's report states that his, quote, investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government. The Russian operatives who perpetrated these schemes did not have the cooperation of President Trump or the Trump campaign. The special counsel found no evidence that any American, including anyone associated with the Trump campaign, conspired or coordinated with the Russian government. Again, the special counsel's report did not find any evidence that members of the Trump campaign or anyone associated with the campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government. As he said from the beginning, there was, in fact, no collusion.
My God, halfway through that press conference, I started expecting Barr to rip off his mask and reveal it was Trump the whole time. The Mueller investigation had questions it was supposed to answer. Now we have the report. We can take our time and go through and hopefully get answers to those questions. And on top of that, the guy who wrote the report, the guy who almost never speaks publicly, Robert Mueller himself, might actually testify in public before Congress.
Jerry Nadler, who is the chairman of the House Committee on the Judiciary, has now formally requested that the Honorable Robert Mueller, the special counsel, come and testify before Congress no later than May 23rd.
Wow, we might actually hear from Robert Mueller. He never speaks in public. Honestly, I don't even know what his voice sounds like. For all I know, he could sound like Bobcat Goldthwait, or maybe his mouth moves like a South Park character.
You will respect my authority.
We don't know. So once Barr was done with his press conference, Congress and reporters finally started to get their hands on the report. But the way they got the report was as weird as everything else about how Trump's team handled the process.
Good morning, everyone. So here's how this plays out. First, Congress gets the report delivered this morning on CD.
Now we have this interregnum for 45 more minutes before members of Congress are allowed, and of course the members of the public are allowed to see the CD-ROM of this report.
Any minute now, we are expecting a Justice Department official to come and drop off a disc of the redacted report to the House Judiciary Committee. We are expecting, Jake, in a matter of moments, the disc to be dropped off.
That's right, a compact disc. They got the Mueller report the same way we all got Encarta. Seriously, this is how the government handles one of the most anticipated documents in recent political history? Was it a report, or did they just send Congress a mixtape? In fact, as reporters were waiting For this disc to arrive, everyone was literally sitting on the Justice Department website reloading the page where the report was supposed to be posted.
It is up. Is it online? You can go to www.justice.gov, and I think it's /storage/report.pdf.
We're just waiting to find out more. I'm sure everyone is eagerly hitting the refresh button on the Department of Justice website.
Oh, good. So the same way people see if they got their Coachella tickets. Also, can we hear that website link again?
You can go to www.justice.gov, and I think it's /storage/report.pdf.
My God, that link constitutes obstruction of justice. Just buy MuellerReport.gov or something. If you're going to make it hard to find, why not go all the way and post it at justice.gov/stories/report/no/collusion/innocent/witch hunt/don't look/stop clicking/why are you clicking/messageboard/napster.biz. But still, now we have the actual report, and suffice it to say, it's a lot more damning and nuanced and legally dense than Barr made it sound. For example, on obstruction of justice, there's that question of whether Trump had corrupt intent. Now, Republicans have been chiding everyone else for thinking Mueller's appointment would be the end of Trump's presidency. They've been mocking people for saying, oh my God, this is the end of his presidency, he's But apparently, one of the people who thought that was Donald Trump himself, because according to the report, when his then Attorney General Jeff Sessions told the president that a special counsel had been appointed, the president slumped back in his chair and said, oh my God, this is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. I'm Oh, the one time we wanted you to be right, and you weren't. No, it will not surprise you to hear that even after all of the new damning details in the report, the president, who spent the last 2 weeks calling it a total and complete exoneration despite not reading it, called the 400-page final report a total and complete exoneration despite not reading it.
When I talked to people inside the Trump campaign, Trump advisors earlier this morning, they just feel like this is a complete victory. I talked to one Trump advisor who said this is a $40 million bill of health, clean bill of health for the president.
I'm sorry, but Donald Trump has never in his life gotten a clean bill of health. I mean, for one thing, this is his doctor. Hey, good news, man. I did an x-ray and most of your bones are still there. Second, the report is full of damning evidence about the president's various attempts to influence the investigation. Mueller writes that those attempts were mostly unsuccessful, largely because the persons who surrounded the president declined to carry out orders. In fact, we've gotten so many more details about the campaign's ties to Russia. Just take Trump's ex-campaign chairman Paul Manafort is one example. Manafort communicated with a Ukrainian political consultant tied to Russian intelligence named Konstantin Kilimnik. Kilimnik proposed a peace plan for Ukraine that Manafort has since acknowledged was a backdoor means for Russia to control eastern Ukraine. Kilimnik wrote an email to Manafort expressing the view, which Manafort later said he shared, that the plan's success would require U.S. support to succeed. All that is required to start the process is a very minor wink from Donald Trump. Of course, with Trump, it's impossible to know if he's winking or just trying to read off a teleprompter. I mean, this is what he looks like when he's just trying to read a prepared statement.
10,000 known or suspected gang members.
Suspected, as in Robert Mueller suspected that Trump obstructed justice. Again, the report is detailed. There's a lot to go through, and it will take time for journalists and political systems to process it, but it's worth keeping in mind that after Barr's first letter, Republicans told us it was a major political win for Trump. Compare that to a CNN poll that found many voters felt very differently about the Russia investigation.
Robert Mueller's work is done, and among the many remaining questions, how will it weigh on voters in the 2020 election?
So, look, this is a recent poll we just asked. We open-ended it, said, okay, what's the most important issue for your 2020 vote? So voters could say pretty much anything. But look at this. Look where the Russia investigation, 0% said that was the most important to their vote in 2020. Exactly. Zero respondents said Russia.
Wow, that guy went full Willy Wonka. 0, you get nothing. Good day, sir. So Mueller laid out the facts, and now it's up to Congress. In fact, there are multiple specific references to Congress in this report, including one line that is very direct.
I just think this sentence is enormously important.
Read it again.
The conclusion that Congress may apply the obstruction law to the president's corrupt exercise of the powers of office accords with our constitutional system of checks and balances and the principle that no person is above the law. This is an invitation to Congress to say you can do it using the impeachment power.
So now it's up to Congress to do their job. I don't know if they will, but if they did, the Trump presidency would be
wrapping up, winding down.
Wrapping up.
Winding down.
This has been a closer look.